Hey guys, so today we are beginning a brand new mini-series by Kings and Generals. This one is called How the Mongol Empire Fell. And I'm going to divide this into parts. Today we're going to look at how the empire fragmented, then we'll continue with the Ilkhanate, the Chagatai Khanate, the Yuan Dynasty, and the Golden Horde. So this will be about 5 days to complete. And, yeah, just let me check. Okay, good, my audio is being picked up. Okay, good. So I just want to make sure everything's going well. So yeah, this will be really cool, and we're almost near the end of Mongol month, which is what I have called January since I've looked at nothing but Mongols videos this entire month. And I'm really looking forward to just seeing, learning more about the fall of these, I call them, I guess, successor khanates, the successor khanates of the Mongols, and how it all kind of ended. So that's gonna be very interesting to see. And yeah, I don't really have much else to say other than I always want to give credit where it is due. If you want to watch the original video by the Great Kings and Generals, the link is down in the description down below. And if you maybe like my content and want to help me out a little, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. I would really appreciate it a lot. With that said, and without any further ado, let's get to it, shall we? Let's watch How the Mongol Empire Fell, Part 1.
We have made many episodes on the history of the Mongol Empire, about its creation, early successes, armies, and much more. But no empire survives the tides of history, and the fate of each is to fall. The Mongol Empire was indeed no exception. In today's documentary, we take you through the collapse of the unified Mongol Empire, as well as the fall of its successor khanates. And while we see what went wrong for the fall of the Mongol Empire is poorly represented in most popular discussions. Often inaccurately, it is stated that it collapsed upon the death of its founder, Chinggis Khan, in 1227, and the four khanates, the Golden Horde, Ilkhanate, Chagatai Khanate, and Yuan Dynasty, emerged from this ruin. However, this is demonstrably incorrect. After Chinggis's death, the Mongol Empire remained unified for another 30.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. They oversimplify it as if it were like Alexander's empire, right? The moment Alexander died, his empire got divided among the Diadochi. As we covered from the main Mongol series, they continued for a while, all the way to Kublai Khan. And technically, on paper, Kublai Khan was the on-paper ruler of everything. I mean, sure, the empire was technically already divided, but on paper he was still called the Great Khan, and technically was the big honcho, even though that was more in name than in actual practice. But yeah, the Mongols continued to thrive for a while before the fragments really solidified. It wasn't like Alexander's, where just instantly everything fell apart,
3 years. The successors of Chinggis remained not just surprisingly unified, but extraordinarily committed to expanding the empire. His son and successor, Ugadai Khan, truly developed the belief in Mongol world domination, and no longer were conquests undertaken based on lengthy justification, but just for the sake of conquest. Simply remaining an independent
he's in it for the love of the game, you know what I mean?
Power became an act of revolt against Mongol rule, for heaven had decreed all people must submit to the rule of the Chinggisids. In Ugadai's reign, Mongol armies completed the conquest of North China, largely overran Iran and the Caucasus, and conquered the western steppes, before driving into Hungary and Poland in 1241. It was on the initiative of Ugadai and his advisors that the Mongol Empire received a proper administrative structure. Rather than leave the conquered population at the mercy of the Mongolian princes, on the influence of his advisors, Ugadai oversaw the establishment of branch secretariats across the empire.
Yeah, Ugadai, I was really impressed by his many changes and reforms. He really got the empire into a proper, empire, with systems in place and, structure. So I feel like Ugadai is kind of a bit underrated, but I feel like he really got the empire to feel more like an empire. You get what I mean? So I don't know. I feel like I was really impressed by many of his reforms and changes, and in both culturally and administratively. So I feel like he's very underrated in the Khan discussion.
Empire, which essentially divided the empire into 3 large provinces. The governments of each secretariat were responsible for regular taxation, civilian governance, and reconstruction after the initial conquests, and answered to the central secretariat based in Karakoram, the head of which served as the prime minister of the empire. These secretariats were often in competition with the Mongol princes, who saw the lands of the empire as existing solely to be exploited by the Chinggisids, and acted as obstacles to the Secretariat's goals of restoration and protection of the population. Ugadai's successor, Guyuk's 2-year reign, sandwiched between regencies of imperial widows, made the 1240s a brief stagnation of the Mongol dream of conquest. But a grandson of Chinggis, named Mungke, seized power and was enthroned as Great Khan in 1251, killing a great many potential rivals to power. Mungke had despised the instability of the 1240s and launched a new effort to consolidate central authority and renew the conquests on a global level. For this, he needed to leverage the resources of the entire empire for this goal, and enacted a massive Asia-wide census to do so, through re-strengthened secretariats. The result was titanic armies simultaneously operating in China under Mungke and his brother Kublai, while another great force under his brother Hulagu pushed west to conquer the last independent powers of the Islamic world. For an observer on the ground at the end of the 1250s, there was no reason to doubt the inevitability of Mongolian success. All powers had so far failed to withstand them, and this great push seemed poised to bring an even greater swath of the world under their hegemony. Soon, all would be subject to the Grand Khan. However, Mungke's campaign against the Song dynasty became bogged down in sieges, mud and rain in Sichuan province. Disease, possibly cholera from tainted water, ran rampant among Mungke's soldiers, and in the summer of 1259,
the Chevy Equinox is more than an SUV.
Mungke too succumbed to it. The succession was an issue once more. While none of Mungke's sons ever seemed to have been considered candidates, there is a slight indication that Mungke's youngest full brother, Arik Buka, was the closest Mungke had to an heir. Arik Buka had been left in the imperial capital of Karakoram to head the government in Mungke's absence, and in quick order, the central secretariat in Karakoram supported Arik Buka, as did Mungke's sons. Considering it had previously taken years to settle on candidates, it could be that Mungke had left instructions for Arik to become either regent or Great Khan in event of Mungke's death, to ensure a smooth transition. Soon after learning of Mungke.
Alright, that's interesting, because when we covered the main Season 1 of the Mongols by Kings and Generals, the way it was told, it came across that Eric just decided to be an upstart and just take power, almost like, and then causing the fracturing and the civil war. This video now is showing that there is maybe an idea that he was supposed to be the next, heir apparent. Maybe, so I don't know, if true, that changes definitely my perspective on him and the conflict as a whole.
His demise, Arik began to organize a Kurultai to have himself elected as Khan of Khans. This did not sit well with Arik's oldest surviving brother, Kublai. Kublai and Mungke had a poor relationship. Kublai's confrontations with the North China Secretariat, his pretensions to greater autonomy, and perhaps even independence, had resulted in Mungke Khan removing most of Kublai's powers and executing many of Kublai's officials. Kublai was only removed from the proverbial doghouse on the eve of Mungke's final campaign against the Song dynasty. On Mungke's death in 1259, While the rest of the army withdrew to ferry the Khan's body back to Mongolia, Kublai continued to campaign. Kublai saw his window for rulership open, but needed more military victories to his name to make himself a more viable candidate. The stench of having been removed from office by Mongol may have been too great to ignore, as well as Kublai's own interest in Chinese culture, making him an uneasy choice for more traditional Mongols.
That's interesting. Now my perspective has shifted. Certainly, as now Kublai is coming across as the one, to just kind of seize more power. Alright, this video has so far changed a lot of my preconceived notions.
Doubtless, he expected great victories against the Song dynasty would improve his standing. Expecting there to be some time before the next Kurultai was held, Kublai battled the Song until a message arrived from his wife, Chabi, in November 1259. It informed Kublai that his younger brother, Arik Buka, was planning an election for the summer of 1260 and expected Kublai's support. Reluctantly, Kublai abandoned his campaign against the Song, but did not return to Mongolia. Instead, in the first days of 1260, Kublai arrived in Kaiping in what is now Inner Mongolia, better known by its later name of Shangdu or Xanadu. It had been constructed by Kublai in imitation of a Chinese city, and as a quasi-capital, it had previously gotten Kublai in trouble with Mongol and his ministers. It was here that in the spring of 1260, Kublai had himself declared Great Khan of the Mongol Empire. While pro-Kublai biographers, such as Marco Polo or Rashid al-Din, portrayed Arik as rebelling against Kublai, it appears in truth that Kublai had essentially usurped power.
Alright, that's interesting. Like I said, when we watched the season 1 of the Mongol series by Kings and Generals, that's definitely how it came across to me, that Arik was the one who was rebelling and Kublai was the man. But this like I said, this video is definitely changing that perspective I had to where it comes across Kublai's the one who just took it all. Alright, that's interesting. That's actually a very interesting new way to look at things,
By Mongolian standards, his election was decidedly illegal. It lacked representation from the other descendants of Chinggis Khan's children, and was not done in Karakoram or Chinggis's homeland along the Onon and Kurlan rivers. Instead, it was held in Kublai's Chinese-style city, close to China, and accompanied by the trappings of Chinese rulership, including Kublai giving himself a Chinese-era name. Arik Buka continued with a more traditionally styled election, held in July 1260. For the first time, the Mongol Empire had 2 declared Great Khans. After a summer of posturing back and forth, by the end of the year, the 2 brothers were at war. Though Kublai would emerge the victor, the consequences of the Toluid civil war were immense. After taking the surrender of Arik, Kublai invited the other heads of the family to come to a Kurultai to decide Arik's fate and confirm Kublai's election. None came. In the 4 years of war, the Mongol Empire had transformed. In the far west of the empire, the head of Jochi's descendants, Berke, had gone to war with Kublai's other surviving brother, Hulagu. Berke was a Muslim, and while his anger at Hulagu's sack of Baghdad played a role in the hostilities, Berke was also furious at Hulagu's occupation of the Caucasus, northern Iran and Anatolia. These were lands Berke considered as belonging to the Jochid lineage. After learning of Mungke's death and the war between his brothers, Hulagu had taken control of these lands and killed Berke's representatives there. In normal circumstances, the Great Khan would have mediated in such a dispute over lands, for such things had happened before. But due to the war between Kublai and Arik, there was no one to intervene between Berke and Hulagu. Thus they went to war in 1262, concurrent with the Toluid Civil War. By the time Kublai had overcome Arik, the Western Khanates were effectively independent powers. The Mongol Empire was irrevocably broken apart, but not into the 4 Khanates of popular knowledge. From the 1260s until the early 1300s, there were actually closer to 6 Khanates, ruled by the descendants of the various sons and grandsons of Chinggis Khan.
Incoming dishes!
Before the 1310s, the Golden Horde was 2 independent Khanates, ruled by the descendants of Jochi, the Ulus of Batu, the White Horde, and the Ulus of Orda, the Blue Horde. Additionally, the descendants of Chagatai had their Chagatai Khanate. An Ugadayid Khanate, ruled by Ugaday's grandson Kaidu, dominated both his own Ulus and the Chagataids until his death in 1301. The descendants of Kublai ruled in the Yuan dynasty in China, and the descendants of Kublai's brother Hulagu ruled over most of the Middle East in the Ilkhanate. Only in the early 1300s, with the dissolution of the Ugadayid Khanate and subjugation of the Blue Horde by Uzbek of the Golden Horde, do we arrive at the well-known 4 Khanates. Now we look at the continued history and collapse of the most.
Alright, that's interesting. Good to know that, obviously the 4 Khanates are the most popular, that even I'm aware of, but it's cool to see that, the original other 2, like the Blue Horde and stuff, and, how it all kind of evolved into what we knew it would be. So overall, yeah, very interesting.
Most prominent Khanates: the Ilkhanate, the Chagatai Khanate, the Yuan dynasty, and the Golden Horde.
Alright, and tomorrow we'll look at the Ilkhanate and exactly how that fell. So I guess I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye everyone.